So let me just comment on that, though. There's 100 years of law regarding utility monopolies. So we understand what a utility monopoly is and how we have to treat it legally. But what you're raising is an interesting issue, which is a legal bar to selling it, which it seems to me there's almost no case for anymore. Would you agree?
Well, I wouldn't say there's no case for it. I mean, I really think that this is the current landscape is one where we have unevenness across states. We have unevenness across actually the utilities, because many utilities cross states. So I won't go there so much. I'll say it's a secret sauce, because we've got to solve that problem if we're really going to truly bring renewable energy, clean and green for all, or are we going to have environmental ghettos underneath the framework of energy apartheid? If we don't solve that, if we don't step into the secret sauce that Sharif tells us about, it is a guarantee that we will see uneven energy deployment across the country.
So now we know we need the secret sauce. That'll be one of the outcomes of this. There'll be a secret sauce. Heather, please.
Good discussion. One common theme that I heard, which going back to my initial conversation, is education. Whether it's education on various levels and education leading to informed choices. So to speak to some level of taking on responsibility and being able to sort of either you educating or you being an advocate, it comes back down to education. And in particular, a couple different points. So as it relates to STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, and STEM education, I think, you know, to the young lady, the teacher, to your point, I agree with you that STEM education should begin in middle school and adapt based on age appropriateness and go throughout, because this table over here, which links back to their point, if you have that youth education around different types of the STEM energy industry or STEM related career fields and energy, and how does that apply to your community? You can also adapt that to how do you go from working in your community to potentially working in the industry or producing a product that may be more environmentally friendly for the industry. So that transition there so that you understand both sides. And the same table, there was a good point there around developing kind of versus underdeveloped or developing countries. And really there, which when I touched on things like, you know, pipelines and whether they're oil and gas and their discussion around what's the balance. We still use fossil fuels and it's not going away. So yes, there's definitely a need and a desire to push to be more environmentally friendly, but what is the balance there? Because we just talked about in simple things from if you like, whether it could be carpet, you like your mugs, your water bottles, different things. How much of that is made with oil? How much of that does the average consumer even know? And if you knew, would that necessarily change your behavior? So as the US, one of the largest consumers of oil, our behavior has not changed. So coming back and tying that to some level of education in order to make more better choices or more informed choices to, I think it comes back to, you know, what part do you want to play in what part of that life cycle? So yes, there are ways, I think when we also talked about too, while there's that balance, where some of those energy sources that may not be so clean, if you know about it in that education from technology and innovation and where you have access, maybe you come up with ways to make them more environmentally friendly to move the lever, because there's a balance, but there has to be some movement there.
Let me segue and ask Laura to have the final word in this round of the panel. We're going to have one more round with the panel, but take us to one of the thoughts, Laura.
So I think I could address each one of them. You did a good job addressing STEM. I just want to say one thing, that the next generation of science standards has been signed off on by 27 states. Georgia is one of them. Captain Planet Foundation is working with the science coordinator in the state of Georgia because to help develop project-based learning, because now children are going to have to demonstrate knowledge, and they can't just fill out a bubble test and then you think that they understand the concepts that they've been studying. So we are giving them project-based learning, standards-based learning, where kids can solve real-world problems in their schoolyards and their backyards. And that's really important, because most of the states, the 27 states, don't have funding for anything except the high-stakes standards. So they're not helping the teachers develop curriculum, nor are they doing funding the teacher training. So when we get it right in Georgia, and we're very far along, we've signed an MOU, then the gentleman that I spoke of, the science coordinator, is actually the head of the 27 state coalition. So when we get it right here, and we're also working in Kentucky, then we'll be able to share those practices with the other states. And then I just wanted to, CT Vivian, I'm such a big fan of his, but there are other civil rights leaders in this community. We're very rich in Atlanta, as you probably know. Congressman John Lewis, elected 9 times, says that the environmental movement is the bridge from the civil and human rights movement and the progression, and that the environmental movement is the next great global movement. He's got a 100% environmental voting record. He cares deeply about these issues. And then also, you've got Reverend Joseph Lowry and Mrs. Lowry, who's not with us any longer, but they protested environmental injustice over the years, PCBs and these toxic neighborhoods with the incinerators, with sewage treatment plants, with the landfills, with the transportation corridors, where communities of low income were always subjected to the worst living conditions. My husband and I co-founded the Chattahoochee Riverkeeper 22 years ago, and we sued the city of Atlanta because it was unjust. The antiquated sewer systems couldn't handle and process all the waste. So in the south side of town, people were having to deal with sewage in their basements and in their front yards. And then we were sending that mess down to our downstream neighbors all the way through Georgia, Alabama, Florida, to Apalachicola Bay, which is where we raise our shellfish from. There are communities down there that rely on that as an economic driver. We sued the city of Atlanta. Our sewer mayor, Shirley Franklin, the rock star she was, raised $4 billion in bonds. Our water in our Chattahoochee River is 90% cleaner than it was back then. That's a case of improving environmental justice, and there are river keepers all over the world. There's 350 of them in 25 countries, and it's really important for us to realize that these folks that are, taking pay cuts and working for next to nothing are really trying to improve living conditions for all people, but especially the ones that are most impacted and can really have the no voice in the process, or and really have done very little to contribute to the problem. And it's the same thing with climate change, by the way.
So we're going to begin to segue now, and I'm going to come back to each of the panelists. What are we talking about when we talk about rural and urban communities? Are there practices that will be particularly useful to an Atlanta versus one of the outlying suburban or truly rural counties? In Washington, D.C., an urban area, what does it look like compared to Upper Montgomery County, which is a county of 800,000 people outside of Washington, many of whom are very wealthy, but then many of whom are not? And so as we move towards this area of, what is the specific programs or problems that I think somebody typed problems rather than programs in the second question. Please read it that way. They were supposed to be uniform, but it's not a bad idea. What are we talking about? Because we've heard some specific ideas already from our panelists, but can we count on the market to get us there? Will markets get us there? Or is it a combination of markets and government regulation? And what's one specific thing that you're passionate about that you haven't had an opportunity to talk about or you want to reinforce again? And I will just toss the ball to any of you. Let's take only 2 or 3 minutes because we still want to break out one more time.
I'd say it's both. I mean, you know, we're in a moment now where the signal is really strong to the market because of falling prices with clean and green energy. But we're at the same time in a moment where we've got this uneven regulatory space that doesn't actually enable sufficient penetration, particularly in the U.S. That's not really the case abroad, right? You go to Europe, you go to particularly places like Germany, you go even to Asia. You know, a lot of complaints about the Chinese and what they're doing with coal-fired power, but they're actually the largest builder of solar and wind on Earth, and they're consuming the infrastructure as well. So they're building it out and consuming it. And there's some points on the trade side as well we could talk about. So you've got to have both, actually. We've got good market signals, but in this place, we're playing a catch-up game because we went 2 decades of playing games with real science, and that was bad for this country and ultimately not bad for the world. They stepped around this foolishness. So we've got to play real catch-up on both the market and the regulatory side, but I think a little bit more even on the regulatory side here.
Laura?
So I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that Dennis Creech, the founder and the president of South Face Energy Institute, he founded his company, nonprofit company, 38 years ago, and we would not have the Better Buildings Challenge if it were not for him. And what we've done in Atlanta now, he is helping to spread to other cities, underrepresented cities in the Southeast, and he's doing yeoman's work. He launched a training center called the Sweet Center in 2010, and that stands for Southeast Weatherization and Energy Efficiency Training. And he's certified thousands of professional building-related professionals, and a lot of what the work that they're doing is retrofitting the homes in low-income communities. So, you know, what he's doing is having an enormous impact, and it's a great model for those of you who live in other communities to take with you. And then also, there's another program that he has helped initiate called Grants to Green. So there are about 150 nonprofits that have received support to green their buildings, to reduce the energy use and the water use so that they can actually save money and put those dollars to work on their their missions and investments in the community. And so I just wanted
Mr. Creech, could you stand up and take a bow and say a word?
Good. Say something. Say something.
So I'll jump in. I'm
A lot
sorry.
of our partners in this room. It is never a solo act, as you all know.
Okay, good. Heather?
So to answer your question, I do think there's a balance. In addition to the market and government, I think corporate America plays a role and a responsibility in that as well. So the no extra sort of topic of passion. Mine is education. I think that education is key because the education and knowing where you fit leads to what type of economic impact do you want to have or should you have in this kind of whole renewable and broader energy realm.
So I have 3 sons, all in government service. One is works in the Senate, one works in the White House, and one is becoming a naval officer. And the one thing I want to say to you is if we have a sustainable, just economy based on solar and wind and other powers, we become less dependent on unstable fossil fuels from around the world. So the whole society, whether you look at it from a national security standpoint or you look at it from a social justice or ethical basis, I think, you know, we have a duty to our children to leave them a world where we're less dependent on things that we don't want to be dependent on and more with others. But my real question still remains, what's the best practices that each of you is aware of in your community? Although an overwhelming number of you are from Georgia and Atlanta, and we've had one of the primary spokesmen for this issue from the area. What are the things we could carry out of here if we wrote them down on the pad? We're going to break out for actually a limited period of time. We're going to break out for 10 minutes, and each table is to give us at least one idea that's worked really well in a community that someone at the table is familiar with that you could all get behind. So we're going to break out again. We're going to be talking about these questions about what specific programs can we adopt and go from there. Thank you very much. Let's do 10 minutes, work hard, and then we'll get a quick readout. And that readout has to be really quick because we're going to end at 3. Thanks very much. All right, it's time. If the participants can come back up.
Certified, then they have to educate their teachers.
All right.
And bring them up to that.
Now the rules are going to be tightly enforced. You have 30 seconds to give the single idea from each table, or we will run out of time.
He's ready.
All right, he's doing his duty.
I'm up again.
All right. Now let me just say, I'm going to want 1 minute for each of the panelists at the end. So please respect that we're all going to be heard. Okay. 30 seconds for each table for the idea, and then a 1 minute wrap up from each. I got it. I'm there. Go ahead.
Okay. First is community gardens or greenhouses as a way to both involve the community but also environmentally friendly, and you know where your food came from and how it was grown. And secondly, involve the community in actually the process. So for example, installation of solar panels in the community, so you're both employing but also delivering that energy independence to the community.
Perfect. To this table. Hand it right to the next table.
Oh gosh, okay. Well, one thing that came up here was the advantage that land trusts, the land trust in Atlanta, community land trust, bringing in some energy efficient homes into existing neighborhoods that are higher end than the homes that are being built, but to show people the advantages of that energy efficient home. So
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Solar and wind farms and wineries for rural, urban communities, LEED certified buildings and developments, and transportation.
Surtax on excessive energy consumption, rural EMCs that reflect the demographics of the 21st century, financing renewables such as they do in Berkeley, California, where the ability to finance a solar system on your house is carried forward as a tax. And lastly, for Heather, biogas also produces plastics that are biodegradable.
We'll see if one table will follow the rule of one
I'm not going to
idea.
follow the rules. Nobody else follow the
No,
rules.
that's
We're not
fine.
going to start.
I-
U.S. Green Bill, Earthcraft was sort of the same thing. Better building challenge for neighborhoods, patents to humanity, and we also had Block Power, which is a venture-backed group that helps low-income energy efficiency, and that is 30 seconds.
There you go.
That was 17.
Our idea incorporates everyone's idea here through gamification. Like Farmville, we're going to call it Ecoville. And the idea is to have collaboration throughout so that people get extra credit for helping others to learn. And this is from 2 years old and up.
We could do that with Congress.
Okay, our idea, of course, centers background education. Programs that educate at a financial level for upfront costs that demonstrate a strong return on investment and long-term savings and sustainability to the consumer. And we'd like to see this concept also in our education system so that we can start building our next consumers in a healthier way.
My table suggested that I share an example. I'm the honorary consul for Barbados in Atlanta, and I grew up in the island of Barbados. And what is unique about the Barbados model is that it has the highest per capita use of solar energy for households in the world. It's a country of only 300,000 people, but sometimes necessity is the mother of invention, because they have to protect a tourism industry and also protect the fact that continuous reliance on fossil fuels is going to drain the economy of much needed money. So the combination of needing to make sure that that environment remains hugely advantageous for tourism, the government provided the necessary financing and an incentive.
So we are all going to Barbados to see this experiment.
Thank you. We're still stuck on education, and we want to require learning farming techniques, which also include water conservation in schools, and for the schools to have their own gardens, and also visit urban community gardens.
So wonderful ideas, and I don't think there was one that didn't resonate with all of the tables. A lot of heads nodding. We've gotten everybody, right? Oh, I apologize. I thought we'd... No, yep, we got everybody. So, look, we only have a little bit of time left, and we have wonderful wrap-up from each speaker. But first, before they wrap up, I just want you to give some applause, give some love to these speakers. And now, Laura, why don't you lead off, and we'll go for a very short time each. We want to end on time. I just want to thank all of you for making the choice to be with us today and with our wonderful speakers. Laura.
So I was super excited to hear two tables bring up gardens and food justice, because it is, I'm not only passionate about that, but I'm obsessive. I think every school should have a garden, and they should be enculturated, and we have done that at the Captain Planet Foundation. We signed a MOU with the City of Atlanta Public Schools and are working in 4 additional school districts. We have about 170 gardens in the ground with overlays that includes standards-based curriculum, teacher training, teacher kits, so that they can teach all core subjects in the context of the garden, mobile kitchen carts so the kids can cook and taste organic vegetables in the classroom, which is not what they're getting in the lunchroom. And then they plant rows for the hungry before they leave for the summer months, and thousands of servings of vegetables go straight to the emergency food care system. And then just a plug for Tony Seydel, who is a professor at Stanford University, and he has this amazing book. I've seen him present 3 times, most currently a week ago. He was here to talk about disruptive transportation technology, EVs, solar, and battery storage. This book is called Clean Disruption, and it is about, in what he says, his first slides that go up is Park Avenue in New York, and he challenges you and all the horse and buggy, just thousands of horses and buggies on the street, to find the car. And then 13 years later, he challenges you to find the horse and buggy with the thousands of cars on Park Avenue in New York from the same vantage point. And also, we didn't have cell phones, smart cell phones, before 8 years ago. And look at the disruptive technologies there. He's saying that solar, I'll give you 2 examples. Solar is disruptive because it doesn't grow linearly, it grows exponentially. And if it doubles for 7 years, we'll be 100% solar. And the cost, obviously, on the business models and the technology is coming way down. And then with EVs, I have a Tesla. They're expensive, they're not affordable. By 2022, there will be a $22,000 car that gets a 200-mile range. That's been announced. Apple and Google are going to get into the business of EVs, making them, because basically they're computers on wheels, and they only have 17 moving parts as opposed to 2,000 to 3,000 moving parts on a conventional. I know you're going to cut me off, but anyway, Clean Disruption by Tony Seydel. Get it, read it, and learn about it. And then also this special edition of the climate issue is very, very informative about all of what's going on, not only in this country, but internationally in all the different sectors, and it's a great informational piece. Thank you.
Heather.
Great place to land, solutions focus. One will be resources. Obviously, Laura is a great resource for the Atlanta area, but more broadly, focusing on, I like the Barbados, the government incentives, so where we can focus that or make it fit for purpose in a particular state or broader, maybe countrywide applicable, and then partnerships, whether that be partnerships from elementary through technical schools with corporations. So for example, perhaps some type of community day where you learn everything there is to know about a solar plant, or from how it's produced and manufactured to how it actually works. So from the youth, you get the science, technology, engineering, and math, and also potentially for adults, maybe it's a career transition opportunity.
Thank you. Dr. Mike, you get the last word.
We heard a lot in the past about green jobs. I'll tell you, last year, like I told you at the start, with $329 billion just in last year into renewables, we got to think about green finance. And the conversation is already there. It's yesterday's conversation, because next year is going to be even more. We didn't leave the Stone Age by letting the stones run out. There's no reason that we're going to wait around to let the oil run out to get into the green economy. It's already happening. I think those of you in this room know that. And that's the word that's going to carry the day in the end of the day. Thanks.
So thank you to the audience. Give yourself a round of applause. We're dismissed.